Well, that's a pretty painting. Nice color choices, energetic brushwork, dynamic presence, smooth lighting, fulfilling composition, delves a little into my vulnerable side. An all-around nice viewing experience. You might say it's quite beautiful. But what does beautiful mean? Like, it has some spirit to it, some charm. It's not just sitting there, it's engaging you. Engaging me? There's like a meaning to it or something, I don't know. It has a presence, you might say. The point is, something inside of you is different because you looked at this. Something moved. Something is illuminated. The phenomenon of life feels slightly different now. Now there is something else that moves. A different set of values that illuminates something different in me. And life becomes a different phenomenon once again. Now a different value system once more, and something in me changes again, culminating in yet another adjustment to the phenomenon of life. What is that little thing that moves when I look inside of someone else's imagination? What is it that lights up? How do we study it? Is it worth attempting an answer to that ever-elusive question, what are people after all? As time goes on, are we getting closer, or are we getting further away? And are the people of the past so far behind us as we think? Take a visit to the monastery and listen to a lecture from Sandro Sebastian, the art monk. So why doesn't this Sandro Sebastian guy just go to Hollywood and make movies for large profit, or do some art department work, or be a cinematographer or something? Well, I'm more creative than the people behind the camera, and I'm better looking than the people in front of the camera. So maybe you all should work for me. Send me your resume, I'll get back to you, I'll find something for you to do. And in any case, all that popular culture content is made by people who are not special in any way. It's just the random person in the cubicle next to you with an extreme makeover. The people behind the camera are just as common, in case you can't tell by the quality of the content. And if you want to stay in business, you need a generic one-size-fits-all formula for filmmaking that can be learned by anyone, because that's exactly who they hire to make these things, is anyone. My job doesn't really work like that. And then there's the issue of wealth and money and power, the authority that Americans believe they can all achieve through capitalism. Like if you quote-unquote work hard, will one day make you into a big shot. Just keep running on that hamster wheel. But let's take a look at the abstract side of capitalism. In order for someone to be rich, someone else has to be poor. Your money, your precious hard-earned proof of status, is only worth something because someone else doesn't have it. If everyone had money, then it wouldn't be worth anything. That's how money is money. It doesn't work by magic. The poverty has to be steered onto someone, somewhere. You need someone to exist beneath you solely to be exploited for their labor, even if you import them from somewhere else. Wealth doesn't naturally find its way to you just because you're so awesome. It doesn't simply materialize out of thin air around you because you're somehow special. It has to come from somewhere. Capitalism doesn't reward people with higher levels of work ethic, no. It rewards people that are more obsessed with money. The two are not the same thing. Now, if you want to be rich, you definitely need to possess high levels of work ethic. But if you are a person with loads of work ethic, you don't have to care about being rich. So the two qualities may slightly overlap, but they are not the same trait. There are plenty of hardworking people who are just not that materialistic, and plenty of lazy people who are totally materialistic. People in America don't think about how slave labor technically isn't free. As working humans, the slaves require food, meager shelter, clothing, and basic medical attention, only if to keep them alive enough to do the work, but they receive no paycheck in the meantime. Where would you rate the modern-day minimum wage across America? How much does that cover? Enough food? meager shelter, clothes, and just enough medical attention to keep you alive enough to work. Is it much more than that? I guess maybe rich white folks have some super secret special kind of knowledge about the universe. I see it in their movies and television programs. Apparently there's this glamorous, magnificent race of extra special people that God just loves better than the rest of us. All the wealth and privilege just naturally materializes out of thin air and floats over to them. They can't help it if they are superior, I guess. Remember, the lecture is about the social factors that define how we see ourselves in our heads. If you believe you possess some super secret special kind of knowledge, or magical skill or information about the universe that the rest of us simply wouldn't understand, or don't have access to, like this is secretly all about you. Secretly. They don't know, but we know. They don't know, but we know. You know when you're white, and the thing with you know that they don't know, but we know. Yeah. If that's what you believe, and you're the only ones who see it, maybe then that's what makes it special? I don't know. If it turns out that there actually is such a thing as a master race, then you've got nothing to worry about. Western imperialism, forever straddling the line between superiority complex and inferiority complex. I'm picturing a political scenario where black people make up the upper classes, captains of industry, politicians, and high-ranking military and law enforcement officials. Universities and institutions, and all non-black people are safely subdued in subservient positions as butlers, manual laborers, working on the factory floors only, living in the slums and ghettos with higher rates of incarceration and poverty. I'm looking at that and thinking, thank God we have all those non-blacks safely subdued, knowing their place, because we have some super secret special kind of knowledge they simply wouldn't understand. That they don't know, but we know, right? Like, you know, the thing when you're the special race and you know how to, the other races can't, you know, that you know, they don't know, but we know. I'm picturing that. Ew, right? Like, now how come that idea just grosses me out? And any other ethnic minority would say the same, like Hispanic people having a country where we aggressively push all non-Hispanics out of the economy to make ourselves feel better. Or Asian people. Like, thank God we have all those non-Asians completely subdued, working as manual labor only, so we can feel superior now. I feel better now. That's a relief. Yeah, there's no country in the world where any non-white group is doing this to the general human race. To the rest of us, the idea is grotesque. Don't even mention that, Sandro. But for white folks, this is just normal. Like, that's just what you do. And you wonder why you don't have any fans that don't look like you. As an artist who is of color, at least I'm more likely to have fans that don't look like me, man. I mean, the rest of us don't protest against each other. It's always against you white folks. Did you think that was some kind of coincidence? As a sort of side note, but keeping in with the theme of identity in the abstract sense, let's look at an abstract difference between an African American and an immigrant American. And by that latter term, I mean all of the other hyphenated ethnic minority groups that found their way here over the last several centuries, even the ones from Eastern Europe and Ireland who eventually became white. A typical immigrant American journeys here with hopes and dreams of hooking myself into the economy and integrating. African Americans were brought here for the purpose of being excluded from the economy because I need an underclass of disposable labor to exploit so I can pay for all this. Distinctly different from a regular immigrant. People forget that the slaves were never supposed to be set free. That was a fluke. An executive order signed in a time of crisis. Just because the blacks are free doesn't mean I have to change my business model and now let them into the economy. No, that's not why I brought them here. I brought them here to be exploited for their labor, as capitalism relies on it. So I'll pass a bunch of Jim Crow laws that keep them where I need them. If you want me to include them in the economy, you're going to have to make me. Even the civil rights movement of the 1960s wasn't supposed to happen. Also a fluke. So you still have to make me. Immigrant American, African American. Two distinct categories. Abstract white rhetoric. If all races are truly equal, then why do I feel so superior? Answer me that, Sandro. Ha! You know, man, I think you got me there. I can't argue with that, man. Whew, I'll think twice before I challenge you. I didn't see that coming. What is this movie rated again? Is it rated R? NC-17? Like, this is some intense shit right here. Like, fucking Nightmare on Elm Street, man. Oh, God. Now, I'm not really a civil rights activist kind of guy. I'm just interested in human behavior and human psychology, and I'm not a touting Black Lives Matter type of person. But my slogan is more like, the rest of us have women and children too. If that argument isn't good enough, I don't know what is. By the way, you are free to debate with me the moment you hear me give an opinion on something. But I'm not a politician running for office or a social activist. My political opinion is not what we're here for. And notice I'm not giving any statistics. Because what are statistics but a coded way of giving your opinion? I'm but a humble artist, selling a method of abstract reasoning, learning how to see with more than just our eyes, talking about how we see ourselves in our heads, and how it influences our behavior, and makes us capable of anything. Capitalism, colonialism, and the social construct of race all come from someone's imagination, and you have the right to build up your own imagination to defend yourself. Psalm 12, 1-8. Help, Lord, for the godly man ceaseth, for the faithful fail from among the children of men. They speak vanity every one with his neighbor, with flattering lips and with a double heart do they speak. The Lord shall cut off all flattering lips, and the tongue that speaketh proud things, who have said, with our tongue we will prevail. Our lips are our own. Who is Lord over us? Ooh. For the oppression of the poor, for the sighing of the needy, now will I arise, saith the Lord. I will set him in safety from him that puffeth at him. The words of the Lord are pure words, as silver tried in a furnace of earth, purified 7 times. Thou shalt keep them, O Lord. Thou shalt preserve them from this generation forever. The wicked walk on every side, when the vilest men are exalted. When you see the rich and powerful presenting themselves weekly on television, building shrines to themselves and commanding the attention of the masses, having influence, they are copying the social status of someone like Jesus by mimicking what his popularity looks like on the surface. Well, Jesus is this guy whose program we watch every week when we go to church, and he has a massive following, and people gush about how amazing he is and how he's inspired them. I'm a Hollywood celebrity, and I have a massive following of people who gush over me, telling me how much I inspire them and watch my television show or movies weekly, just like people going to church. So it's kind of like, I'm Jesus. Everyone should take my advice on morals and principles and the purpose and function of humanity, what we ought to do and believe, because I have the same status. Well, only for those who are convinced by how things look on the surface. I mean, for those who do believe in Jesus as the only Messiah, the literal Son of God, born of a virgin, the Savior of humanity, remember, not giving my own opinion, just explaining what the big to-do is about that fellow for those who do believe, in case you're curious. He is the only one I have to acknowledge to receive the kingdom of heaven when I die. If you're a pop star or Hollywood celebrity, whether or not I like your movies or your music doesn't affect where my soul goes when I die. So that's one difference right there. Also, when it comes to the people who hurt me and abused me in my lifetime, all those who never faced justice, and my emotional baggage was carried into my adult years. Those people who abused me and never faced justice will have to accept Jesus as Lord and Savior, or they receive eternal damnation for hurting me. So I've got someone sticking up for me. You, as a Hollywood celebrity, don't do that. You only talk to me when you want to sell me something. So there's another difference for those who believe, anyway. Why do Hollywood celebrities hate Jesus so much? Is it because he doesn't buy tickets to your crappy little movies? All I know about you is what you do for a living. As far as your personality, all I know for sure is that you like money and you like popularity, which is like, so does everybody. The rest of us are just not that shameless about it. But Jesus is someone I know on a personal level and has influenced me in a way that only a personal acquaintance can. I've seen incurable emotional baggage lifted off of me in a way that I couldn't have done on my own. You keep taunting me like it's some imaginary friend I manifested to make myself feel better. But if we can manifest any imaginary friend we needed to clear away emotional baggage, then no one in the world would have any problems. We'd just manifest the friend that takes it all away. The way people influence you proves their existence. Let's say I meet a person who dresses well, and they rub off on me. I start to dress better as a result. I couldn't do it until someone showed me how. If people can manifest an imaginary friend to teach you good fashion sense, then everybody would be a sharp dresser. Or perhaps I have an associate who is well-read and uses good diction and concisely expresses thoughts with an expanded vocabulary. Discussing things with him is easy and non-stressful, so it inspires me to read more and practice my speech. This person who rubbed off on me is not imaginary, because if we could manifest an imaginary friend like that, we would all have perfect diction, expanded vocabularies, and sharp communication skills. Someone has to show you how. Or perhaps I met someone who convinced me to get married and have kids, to grow up and take responsibility, transformed my life. Or someone motivated me to quit drug and alcohol abuse, to stop acting on impulse and think about the future, get serious about my career. Did I manifest that imaginary friend to help me there? If I did, then why doesn't everybody? Now let's talk about an encounter I had with a Savior who extended a hand to my shoulder and said that whatever they did to you, when you were young and vulnerable, however your society treats you, is not okay. It's not a matter of opinion or perspective. Doing things that turn people's lives into a prison sentence is objectively not okay, and they will be punished if they don't accept me as Lord. So you have the right to love yourself and feel loved by a godly authority, no matter the excuses the world makes in order to justify its massive personality disorder. Notice how being told that completely changes how you see yourself inside your head. Emotional baggage that you took for granted as normal is now lifted, and your behavior for the rest of your life is just a bit more civilized. Did I manifest an imaginary friend to show me how to do that? Then why doesn't everybody? Why Jesus? Because don't be a pussy. And how much do you trust the way you see yourself inside your head? Is that person real? What has Sandro Sebastian been talking about this whole time? How do you know you are not your own imaginary friend? Now, to conclude the sermon, the person who taught me to dress better could have been anyone. Doesn't need to be anyone special. The person who taught me to speak better also needn't be anyone supernatural or directly related to God Almighty. The person who convinced me to grow up, get married, take responsibility, could also be a mere mortal. Anyone. Same goes for the person who motivates me to kick my drug habit. Or a therapist who helps you work through a traumatic childhood, could be anyone. Maybe you like Sandro Sebastian paintings. and he helps you get in touch with your imagination and clears some emotional baggage. But I could still be anyone. I don't need to be some special supernatural being. And a Hollywood celebrity, the ones they manufacture and promote over the airways, those people could be literally anyone. They can make anybody famous these days. But Jesus, the Son of God, born of a virgin, destined to redeem mankind, he who will punish the wicked for disobeying, he's the only one that can't be just anyone. It has to be him. But again, I'm not here to give my opinion, just giving you the big to-do about that guy. For those who do believe, this is the sales pitch. That's why they believe. The evidence is just abstract. Why do I get my moral guidance from the Bible? Because it's been around longer than social media. So with this art stuff, Sandro, why does it look so different from century to century? Like, how come we don't paint like the Renaissance masters? And we don't even paint like the Impressionists? But it's not just the more watered-down, superficial, abbreviated nature of modern art. There's a technique difference across the centuries. Ever since first encountering these Renaissance pieces in college, in my post-adolescent young adult world, that phase when you are still relying mostly on your parents, but are starting to discover your own adult personality, when I studied these pictures in that context of life, on my own, albeit in a highly monitored, structured, and regulated environment, with adult supervision in the form of teachers and college administrators, I became fascinated with the way those people saw paint, the Renaissance masters that is, and how they create that illusion of depth in a way we don't anymore. I was curious why my own teachers didn't look at it this way. For some reason, when we paint, in the modern era, it's like we're just putting paint on top of the surface, like sticking a sticker on it. Whereas these Renaissance giants are digging down into the surface, turning the painting into what seems to be a three-dimensional diorama that you could reach into and touch, perhaps. You're looking at one of these things and are like, is that even paint? Then why does it look like smooth marble or stone? How come when you put paint on a brush and wipe it on a surface, it looks like that, and when I load paint onto a brush and wipe it on a surface, it looks like ketchup from a ketchup bottle? I mean, in the 20th century, we can still paint gradients. We can create that smooth curvature that suggests volume, like they teach one to do in freshman art class 1A. And it's not like I don't love someone like Salvador Dali, or Lucien Freud, or the earlier Picasso works before he started going flat abstract. I love it all, but you have to wonder why it doesn't have that three-dimensional diorama feel, where I can almost literally see the air around it. How come we don't dig that deep? We just copy what it looks like on the surface. And just how is that effect achieved anyway? The three-dimensional diorama feel. How do you not have your brushstrokes look like ketchup from a ketchup bottle? It can't be just the ability to paint gradients, because our 20th century artists don't do it, and there are people who paint in that classical style today, mimicking the Renaissance look, but it still feels very artificial. Just not so much the diorama feel, just really fancy, highly chiseled ketchup squeezed from a bottle. Maybe we can perform the experiment ourselves. In order for this experiment to work, we can't use any gradients, and we won't even use different colors. We'll use red paint, which looks kind of orange in this light, but you get the gag. Like literally ketchup from a ketchup bottle. We're just going to smear it on the surface and take one brush and carve something out. Now, it's not going to have any shading. There might not be a direct light source, and it could be largely camouflaged, but maybe we can still paint that three-dimensional diorama feeling onto the surface, because as we said, it should not have to do with gradients or using darker shades to mimic shadows. Because we have 20th century artists that do that, and it's not quite the same trick. Don't you just love paint, though? It's just such great stuff. Just wiping the knife off on the canvas, we don't want to waste any paint. This painting will be done in oil, as you see. Most of the works I do for these videos are acrylic because they dry quickly. But because I want this to stay wet while I carve it out and not dry while it's on the surface so I can keep pushing it around, that's why I'm using oil here. But we're going to cover this surface nice and good, and we'll see if we can carve something out of it. How much do you love paint, though? I mean, it's just great stuff. Obviously, you can see that I love it a great deal, but it really does hold the shape of the human imagination quite well. It's the stuff that they let you goof around with when you're maybe in kindergarten or first grade, but then after that they take it away from you for some reason. And then when you're a grown adult, you try to paint something and it looks like it's done by a 4 or 5-year-old child. Because that was the last time you explored this part of your identity. You haven't spoken in so long. Looks like you got some catching up to do, huh? Now let's start digging here. I'm going to start carving something out, but it's not a sculpture, it is a painting. But there's not going to be any shading or different colors, Sandro. How are we supposed to know what has been arranged and what has not been arranged? It's all going to be camouflaged. Well, but you can tell where a brush has been and where a brush has not been. So there is a sense of drawing happening here due to how thick I laid it on. But how can you create a 3-dimensional diorama feeling when it's a 2-dimensional surface? Well, that's why we're exploring this. The Renaissance masters did it. They just use multiple colors. Now, I can't promise this is going to be the best looking painting in the world, but maybe we can learn something. Do you already see something starting to form? Or is it too camouflaged? Now, at this point, what appears to be a nose and 2 eyes in the frame of a head. Okay, I think it's a face. Ooh, maybe that's the hair hanging in front of the eye? No, maybe that's just his forehead. And he's bald or bald-ish. Anyway, at this point, it is functioning kind of like a drawing, but if you squint your eyes or focus, is any part of it taking on a bulbous quality? Do we feel any volume in the nose or the eye sockets or the cheek? Or is it just a drawing being scratched onto the surface? Like a cave painting. But who says those cave paintings don't have depth and perspective and volume? They don't have gradients, but do certain parts of the painting come forward and certain parts go back into space? Is he painting the air? How do you have to look at it? The face is looking kind of muddled now. We're not getting any distinct facial features. General sense of eye sockets and nose. But is the space convincing? Or is it still just a 2-dimensional illustration, a flat drawing? Are his cheeks bulging? Is the nose protruding? Is that really happening, or are we just projecting that? Well, you could ask that of every painting ever. So you can ask it for this one if you want. But that's just a question we always ask when looking at art. How much of that is actually happening, and what are we projecting? What's real and what's fake? The eternal question of life. I'm kind of cheating right now by letting the top of his head be defined by the white canvas poking through the curve on the back side of his head, but I'll cover that up momentarily. We have to let go of the safety net here. Let's just see if we can push this background behind the head, behind the face, so it feels like it's moving back in space, like there's some air between him and the wall behind him. Is the jawline firm? Does the forehead rotate around? And then there's the ear moving along the side of the head, moving back in space. Does it feel further away from us than his nose? Well, there's no shading. Yeah, but the shading isn't what creates the feeling, as we've discussed. Or is it? I feel like if I use my imagination, Sandro, and I squint and I give you the benefit of the doubt, then it has that 3-dimensional diorama feeling, but I don't know if you're really doing it, though. Well, can you be sure? I mean, I definitely see a face, and it's starting to take shape and convince me, but is it just a 2-dimensional drawing? I think I see some depth there. Even the lips are starting to kind of come in. Where the upper lip separates the lower lip. I'm going to kind of skip ahead here, about 6 minutes in. Because I'm not changing colors or brushes all that much, it's not so much of an action-packed demonstration, but it's a nice face to look at. I'll skip over some of the more tedious parts. Okay, now let's take off the training wheels and cover that gap above the head, so fill in that white space I was using to define where the head ends and the space behind him begins. I've sealed it off. You can still make out where the top of his head is, though, can't you? It's just been tampered with differently. The brushwork doesn't have to be that smooth to create a sense of depth, as you're seeing. But I still can't decide if I'm projecting that, Sandro. I know. And I think it took me a minute to get into this because this is not the way that I normally paint. That three-dimensional diorama feeling of a Renaissance piece, which was a super big deal at the time. Now that we live in a world that's post-photography, and computer graphics, it's not as big a deal as it used to be, so we still love those Renaissance pieces, but not for the same reasons. But needless to say, that practice will never find its way into my regular body of work. I don't need to do something that looks like that porcelain figure three-dimensional diorama thing. I'm okay with my paintings feel like ketchup from a ketchup bottle, but as long as they have a different spiritual quality about them. I'm just doing this as an experiment. And I am trying to bring in the chin down there. Have it feel like it's curving underneath where the lip ends and protruding a little bit. Yeah, that's not a soul patch down there. This guy doesn't play the acoustic guitar. And as you can see, I'm having a little bit of trouble here. Because as I discovered while doing this, I really don't like this way of painting. It feels generic. It feels predictable and overly reliant on a very overrated painting phenomenon. But I think some of the space is starting to show up. Maybe if you have someone that likes that technique better than I like it, then they could perform the ketchup bottle experiment and we can get more conclusive results about where is that three-dimensional diorama feeling actually happening and where are we just projecting it. Are we starting to lose the face? No, I think it's becoming a little more clear. It still looks kind of melty and painterly, but like I said, this was never going to be the best looking thing. And with a painting like this, with no lighting or shadow or different colors, there's no reason to bring in all the details of the ear, all that cartilage moving and twisting back there. With a painting like this, you just drive yourself crazy. Let's see if we can decide on what that chin is again. Make it look less like a soul patch and more like the curvature of the chin. Is all this fumbling doing anything? Is it moving forward? Am I losing the painting? Am I finding it? This ear, I am rather nervous about having it fade into the background. We do want to know where the ear stops and the background begins. That is important. And then the background does have to sit back, as it were, behind him, and we have to feel the air around his head and behind him, like there's a wall behind him, but not right behind him, you might say. I feel like the bottom half of the face is getting better. The cheeks and the nose. This forehead I'm still kind of anxious about, obviously. Now the right half of his face does feel a little faded going back to the ear, but it's not lost completely. I hope you can see where the ear ends. The eye sockets, are they actually receding into the skull, or is it just because I've wadded up the paint so thick, particularly on the eye on the left-hand side, his right eye? Am I really seeing the skull cave in there, or is it just because it's so thick, almost acting like a sculpture? Maybe painting is a two-dimensional sculpture. Maybe sculpture is a three-dimensional painting. Or maybe it's all bullshit. Maybe we're all projecting all of it, even the cave paintings at Lascaux, even the ancient Egyptians. Maybe we're all projecting all of it. Okay, well, that's a valid theory, but not a very interesting one. Now, I actually am trying to put some neck down there. There doesn't appear to be an outline defining the neck, but But does the trachea bulge out a little bit where the chin ends? Just below the chin? Or are we projecting that too? It would probably be a good idea to mess up the neck area a little bit more to get it to show up. But maybe because I've told you to look for the neck, you're squinting and seeing it. What is fake and what is real? Remember, I'm not using any other colors and I'm not using any gradients. We're just trying to get this three-dimensional thing to show up on a two-dimensional surface, which is what all painting is. This kind of painting anyway. Figurative. This is a 2D surface, and it started as ketchup from a ketchup bottle. But I think it doesn't look just like a skull. There's some flesh there. The cheeks are a bit fleshy. The eyes look like it's just a pure skull, but I'm not going to try and put in the pupils and the eyelashes and the eyelids on something like this. That'll keep us here all day. I think I'm going to skip ahead again because you're getting the idea. At least we can see what it is, right? And now let's take a closer look. Ooh, nice and creamy and rich. Yes. The mouth area did come in quite interesting. The heavily impastoed feel is what they call it. The neck is there. You can decide if it's really there. The ear and the eye socket are there. Is the impasto creating the feeling of depth like a sculpture? Or did I actually pull off the trick I said I was going to pull off and carve something into the surface, like a three-dimensional diorama? Here's another photo of it in direct overhead light with full spectrum light. And in case you're wondering, yes, I did have a live reference. This is not working from a photograph due to the nature of the experiment. I wonder whose face I used. Oh, hey, I know that guy. Oh, look, he's only wearing one glove. Well, I guess he would only need one glove. One glove, one heart. Let's get together and feel alright. He's just like this. I don't know. But he makes good paintings, though, so we kind of put up with it.